Superman has gotten a lot of adaptations outside the comics throughout his 87-year-old history, with many of them being able to capture the spirit of his comics so well that they even added new elements that became integral parts of his mythos. One of the best adaptations of the character we've ever seen was Superman the Animated Series, a show that modernized the hero and his world for a new generation of fans whose first impression of Superman came from this fantastic series, myself included. I'm a lifelong Superman fan, and it's all thanks to this great show. It aired on Kids WB from 1996 until the year 2000, comprising a total of 54 episodes during its run, but during its development there were many episode ideas and specific concepts that the series staff never got to make for different reasons, like characters that couldn't appear due to rights issues, or ideas that were so dark that network executives didn't allow them to be used on the show. So today we're going to be taking a look back at its interesting production history, its cancelled episodes, and many rejected characters that we never got to see. The story behind the creation of STAS actually starts with Steven Spielberg, believe it or not. During an interview for the Modern Masters book series, Bruce Timm explained how during the mid-90s, Steven Spielberg approached the president of Warner Bros. Animation at the time, Gene McCurdy, to request a crew that worked on Batman the Animated Series to develop a new show alongside him. Since throughout the 90s, Spielberg decided to enter the world of animation and started executive producing some excellent cartoons such as Animaniacs and Tiny Toons Adventures. Bruce Timm pitched several ideas for potential shows during their meetings. One concept was a sci-fi show inspired by Star Wars, revolving around a smuggler and space pirate. He also pitched an idea for a show with a similar style to Jonny Quest, and another concept was for an original superhero animated series with a light touch of comedy. This eventually led to the creation of Freakazoid, which Bruce Timm initially envisioned as a more straightforward action superhero show with some comedic elements. But he decided to step down from the project since he noticed the direction that the series development was taking, and he believed there were other producers that would work better for a comedy show, and it ultimately became the slapstick cartoon that we all know. And if you didn't know or never seen it, you should totally check out Freakazoid. Given that Timm decided to no longer work on the development of Spielberg's new cartoon, Gene McCurdy offered him the opportunity to produce a new Superman show for Kids WB. And Timm, alongside many of the same creatives that worked on BTAS, agreed, and started conceptualizing this new version of the character and his world. Now, if you're familiar with BTAS and that show's style, then you know that it had a very pronounced influence from film noir and Art Deco. Its world felt like it was directly inspired by the 1940s in spirit, albeit with a timeless quality to it. One of the biggest influences on that show's style was the series of Superman theatrical animated shorts produced by Fleischer Studios from 1941 to 1943, which are amazing by the way, and some of the best pieces of animation to come out of that era, standing as one of the earliest examples of Western animation that had a more serious tone, and wasn't yet another comedic cartoon. This 1940s aesthetic arguably fits Batman better than Superman, and when it was implemented in the development of BTAS, it definitely elevated the show's atmosphere and helped in setting its tone. And when it came time to envision how Superman's world would feel and look like in this universe, they also considered giving the series a retro 1940s influence by taking direct cues from the classic Fleischer shorts.
Originally, Bruce wanted it to be 40s. He wanted it to be a period piece.
We did toy with the idea of doing a very retro-style Superman show. I actually did a whole bunch of character designs that were very, very 40s looking. I mean, even more so than what we had done with Batman.
That would have made the show feel almost as though it was an extension of the Fleischer cartoons.
So I abandoned that approach, and I think for the better.
If they had gone with these designs, STAS would have been far closer in style to how the original run of Batman the Animated Series looked. Bruce Timm has gone on the record saying that the Superman Fleischer shorts had a sense of dark German expressionism in their staging and a slight film noir atmosphere that made it fit naturally with the general style of Batman stories. And I do agree. I personally always wished that Fleischer Studios had also made Batman theatrical cartoons during the 40s, since that tone would have fit Batman's world perfectly, and it was something that they allegedly considered doing back then, but they never did. During a 2021 interview with CBR, Tim explained that while Beats has taken influence from those 40 shorts simply made the show feel kind of Fleischer-esque, and it didn't stand out as an overwhelming inspiration. If Estes would have taken influence from those shorts, it would have made the series feel like an intentional spin-off of the Fleischer Superman, and it would have inevitably came out looking second best. Considering this, it's understandable if they were concerned about the work coming off as a knockoff or imitation of those 40 shorts, ultimately opting for a more modernized, retro-futuristic look. So it's clear from these early designs that Bruce Timm originally wanted to portray Superman with his classic squinty-eyed look from the Siegel and Shuster era, but considering that was the look that Fleischer Studios used for their cartoons, they decided to start working on other possible designs. And DC Comics already had a vision for how they wanted this new animated Superman to look. In a conversation with Screen Rant promoting the series release on Blu-ray back in 2021, Bruce Timm said that in the early stages of development, DC editorial requested them to portray Superman with his then current mullet look. Since during the 90s, once he came back to life after his battle with Doomsday, he returned with a mullet hairstyle and stayed with that look for a few years. Timm refused to give Superman a mullet for the series, and DC was so adamant that things escalated to the point that Bob Daly, the head of Warner Brothers at the time, had to intervene in this dispute and allowed the show's crew to depict Superman with a more traditional look. An interesting fact about this is that we did get to see Superman's mullet look in the DCAU style in some of the tie-in comics they released during the original Batman the Animated Series run on Fox Kids, because those comics were created years before Superman the Animated Series started development for Kids WB. And I gotta say, thank God we didn't have an entire show where Superman looked like this. This show didn't really take that many elements from 90s comics, and besides some exceptions like Maxima, who was created in '89 but was used throughout the 90s, but overall they mainly took inspiration from other points in Superman's history. Paul Dini has gone on the record saying that the biggest influences on the show were the John Byrne era of comics, the Donner films, and bits from the Golden Age Siegel and Shuster era. He said that they weren't allowed to use that many elements from the Silver Age, since DC wanted the show to feel modern, something that would explain some things, like why they never used Krypto, besides showing him for a brief cameo. Beyond these influences, the biggest source of inspiration they had while conceptualizing the series was the Fourth World line of comics and characters, created by the legendary Jack Kirby. This decision came from a desire to give this new adaptation a unique identity when compared to other past Superman projects, with Bruce Timm stating in his interview with CBR that they also chose to incorporate many elements from Fourth World comics mainly as a way to present a more interesting rogues gallery for Superman, since they thought that Batman's rogues gallery was a lot more visually engaging and more well defined. When watching the show, we can also get a sense of its deep respect and appreciation for Kirby's work and its designs and general aesthetic. And they made a direct homage to Jack Kirby by using the character of Dan Turpin, who was actually created in the comics by Jack Kirby himself, and for the show they based his visual appearance directly from him. This belief that Superman's rogues gallery wasn't as interesting as Batman's also prompted the crew to reconsider how they went about portraying his enemies. Some characters such as Lobo were adapted pretty faithfully when compared to their comic counterparts, while other characters like their version of Toyman were completely reimagined for the show. An interesting case is the iteration of Brainiac, since they decided to rework the character and give him a deeper connection with Superman's Kryptonian past. In the animated series, Brainiac was depicted as being a highly advanced Kryptonian artificial intelligence, who was indirectly responsible for the annihilation of Krypton's people. Even though he didn't cause the planet to explode, he was aware of Krypton's condition and that a natural disaster was going to destroy it very soon, so he suppressed this information and actively tried to stop Jor-El from proving his theory. In the interview with CBR we mentioned previously, Bruce Timm mentioned how this new vision for the villain was an idea that series writer and producer Alan Burnett thought of during the very early development.
The idea that he might have been an AI presence on Krypton, that he was partly responsible for everybody not listening to Jor-El so that he could take time to save himself from what was going to happen, was really appealing. And I really pushed for that because I thought, well, this is a way of really giving the series a different spin right off the bat.
Brainiac was voiced by Corey Burton, and Timm said that when he came in for his auditions on the show, he tried out for a lot of roles, such as Superman and Lex Luthor. But when he auditioned for Brainiac, they told him that they wanted a cold, robotic voice for the villain. So he took inspiration from actor Vic Perrin and the voice he used for the 1963 show The Outer Limits, a performance that seemed to fit perfectly with Brainiac, and he immediately got the role. And in general, they did a fantastic job with casting all these characters. Clancy Brown, for example, gave us my personal favorite Lex Luthor portrayal ever, either in animation or live action. And most performances on the series were honestly great, from Tim Daly as Superman to Michael Ironside as Darkseid. Hell, they even had Ed Asner as Granny Goodness.
You naughty little monkey! Granny will spank you good!
If you're familiar with the comics, you'd know that Brainiac isn't usually a Kryptonian artificial intelligence. He's meant to be a highly intelligent being obsessed with collecting all of the knowledge from every civilization throughout the universe. Initially, during his first Silver Age appearances, he was just a regular green-skinned alien from the planet Kolu, usually appearing with a white monkey named Coco. But he was later revealed to be a robot created by the computer tyrants of Kolu, with him constantly being defeated by Superman, but reappearing in different bodies and forms afterwards. Years later, during DC's post-crisis era, it was revealed in a story written by Jeff Johns and illustrated by Gary Frank that every past version of Brainiac we've ever seen weren't the real Brainiac, and we actually get to see the original Brainiac, showing him as an alien cyborg with a partly organic body that's been enhanced by highly advanced technology. While the animated series iteration of the villain greatly departed from his comic book counterpart, the show's crew did consider other ways of adapting him. When they were still considering having Fleischer influences during the very early development, they also made a design showing how Brainiac would have looked with his retro aesthetic. And I personally think he kinda looked more like the traditional Koluan version of the character, rather than a Kryptonian AI. But that's just speculation on my part. Series artist, director, and character designer Dan Reba has also shared some early designs from the production of STAS, showing that at one point they considered using General Zod and Ursa. And I really like these designs. They seem to be directly inspired by their looks from Superman 2. Both of them were essentially replaced with the original villains Jack Sur and Mala on STAS itself, but Zod did make an appearance on the 21st issue of the Superman Adventures tie-in comic, with him later reappearing for an issue of the Justice League Unlimited tie-in comics. Allegedly, both Zod and Ursa couldn't be used on the actual show due to rights issues. Speaking of unused characters from the comics, Cat Grant is a recurring character from the Daily Planet supporting cast, but she wasn't included in the animated series because they wanted to diversify the lineup, choosing to replace her with an original Asian American character instead, named Angela Chen. This was revealed on an old interview that Bruce Timm and Paul Dini had on the 59th issue of Wizard magazine, where they also shared some details on other characters that they wanted to tackle but never ended up being used on the show. They both mentioned their desire to use Mr. Miracle for an unmade episode, and we would get more details about this on a 2006 interview that World's Finest had with Mark Evanier, who worked as a writer on the show. During that conversation, he said that he wrote a script for an episode that involved Mr. Miracle, but it never ended up being produced for the show. He later repurposed the idea for an issue of a tie-in comic, and while he didn't specify which issue he was talking about, I believe he was referring to either issue 42 or issue 53 of Superman Adventures, both of which featured team-ups between Superman and Mr. Miracle, and it would have been really awesome to see him as a guest star on the show itself, since while Mr. Miracle did make small cameo appearances on both Superman the Animated Series and later on in Justice League, they never really got to use him prominently as a main character of an episode, although his wife, Big Barda, was used a bit more, especially in Batman Beyond. I'm sure that a Superman and Mr. Miracle's story would have been great to see. Yeah. Another unused character that Paul Dini and Bruce Timm mentioned on their interview with Wizard magazine was the Spectre, since they mentioned an episode idea for the Spectre Christmas show, which we can assume would have been a Christmas episode guest starring the Spectre. Something that sounds a bit bizarre, but really interesting. A writer from the show, Stan Berkowitz, later expanded on this in a 2005 interview with World's Finest, where he was asked what DC character he would have liked to see Superman team up with on the show. He responded that he always liked the Spectre, yet they couldn't use him on the series due to rights issues, and that's truly a shame, since the Spectre is one of those few classic DC characters that never ended up appearing on any DCAU show. At the 2009 New York Comic Con, Toonzone conducted an interview with Bruce Timm while he was promoting the then upcoming release of Wonder Woman's animated movie, and there he revealed that they actually wanted to introduce Captain Marvel Billy Batson on an episode of Superman the Animated Series, and they would have had both characters fighting each other, but they were denied permission by the studio since the character was off limits, because Warner Brothers was apparently developing a Shazam movie around that time. Ultimately, Billy Batson made his DCAU debut years later during the Justice League Unlimited episode Clash, where we finally got to see these two iconic characters fight. On that 2005 interview with Stan Berkowitz that we previously mentioned, he also stated that the only story he wanted to tell for STAS, but he never got the chance to, was an anti-war episode. Clark Kent would have been sent by the Daily Planet to report on a conflict over oil between two small countries, and when he sees the violence and bloodshed, he decides to intervene as Superman. He de-escalates the situation, but once he left the country, the two sides immediately went back to killing each other. Berkowitz mentioned that, since they couldn't have people shown dying on screen in a very graphic manner, he wanted to allude to the violence by showing scenes like an art museum being burned to the ground and comparing the destruction of their culture to the death of their citizens. And considering that this show didn't really shy away from tackling heavier themes, it would have been very interesting to see them handling such a mature premise. Coming back to that Wizard magazine issue with Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, there were a couple other characters they mentioned that were considered to appear on the animated series as guest stars, but never did. The first one was Etrigan the Demon, who ended up appearing on an episode of the New Batman Adventures instead. And the other character they mentioned was Wonder Woman, who most likely couldn't be used on the show due to rights issues, since at that time she had a stipulation where she couldn't appear on a show unless she was a protagonist or a main character, which is also why she never appeared on Batman Beyond even though they wanted to, and she didn't make her DCAU debut until the Justice League show years later. Hearing about all these other DC characters probably made you think about how near the end of STAS, they started introducing a lot of different heroes, like The Flash, Kyle Rayner, Aquaman, Dr. Fate, and more. This led to some people to believe that they were gearing up towards a possible Justice League animated series, and this was kind of true in a way. Back in 1997, Wizard magazine released a special issue focusing on the Justice League, and they conducted an interview with the DCAU crew about the development of STAS. There, they revealed some interesting details regarding their choice of expanding the DCAU with the introduction of other DC heroes into the show. And when asked about the possibility of a Justice League show, they said that while it wasn't officially in the works at that time, they did consider it to be very possible in the future, but they were having some difficulties with trying to figure out how it could work, since having to juggle so many heroes and giving all of them meaningful things to do during each episode added a new layer of complexity when compared to their previous shows. They even briefly considered giving this potential JLA animated series a structure similar to the Adventures in the DC Universe tie-in comic, where a pair of different heroes teamed up in each issue. They also considered a similar idea to this during the very early development of STAS, since in this conversation with Wizard Magazine, Bruce Timm mentioned how they played with the idea of having Superman team up with a different DC hero in each episode. Kinda like The Brave and the Bold, but with Superman instead of Batman. With them making designs for many characters they considered using, and that would be eventually introduced into the DCAU like Hawkman, Hawkgirl, Black Canary, Light Ray, Vixen with long hair, John Stewart with a mask, and Green Arrow with a hood, The Question, Mr. Miracle, and some of them actually never ended up being used on any DCAU show, such as Black Lightning and Nightshade. This idea was ultimately rejected by the then current president and editor-in-chief of DC Comics, Jeanette Kahn, since she believed that their main focus should be on reintroducing Superman and his world to general audiences, and having him share the spotlight with so many other Justice Leaguers would have diminished his character. Series writer Alan Burnett also revealed during this interview that they were toying around with the concept of having the very last episode of the show be the formation of the Justice League, with many of the heroes they had previously introduced on the show. And this is supported by some pieces of artwork, like this concept art showing how the 90s Justice League would have looked like, drawn by character designer and artist Tommy Tejeda. These early plans eventually changed when Jamie Kelmer, who was president of Warner Bros. Television at the time, approached the DCAU crew and asked them to create a show about a teenage Batman instead, which led to the creation of Batman Beyond. Although that didn't stop them from including the Justice League on that show, and they even called it Justice League Unlimited, proving that they had already thought out many things they wanted to do with the Justice League years before they got the chance to make an entire series about them. Besides rejected characters and cancelled episode ideas, we also know about concepts from many episodes that were made but had different plans in their initial stages. In the Season 2 episode titled The Prometheon, we saw an asteroid that was on a collision course towards Earth, with General Hardcastle, Dr. Hamilton, and a team of astronauts being sent on a space shuttle to destroy the asteroid. Superman arrives to help, and upon closer inspection, he sees that there's a huge sleeping alien creature latched onto the other side of the asteroid's surface. Now that he sees a living being on the asteroid, Superman wanted to save both the alien and Earth from being impacted, but suddenly the huge creature wakes up as he's hit by sunlight, making General Hardcastle panic and shoot a missile to destroy the asteroid and kill the alien. This, in fact, did not kill the alien. He fell into Earth and later made his way towards Metropolis to cause destruction, but Superman managed to stop him after luring him into water and freezing him. Stan Berkowitz was a co-writer for this episode, and during his interview with World's Finest, he revealed that the original ending for the story would have shown some aliens finding the huge creature sometime later, once again floating through space while he slept, and these aliens would have somehow awoken the creature. This original ending was apparently even storyboarded, but Berkowitz said that it was cut because the episode ran too long. Season 2 also gave us the debut of Livewire, a loud and aggressive radio jockey that heavily criticizes Superman and later gains electric powers. Her debut episode was co-written by Evan Dorkin and Sarah Dyer, and on a 2006 interview with Toon Zone, they mentioned how it was initially meant to be a Season 1 episode at first, focusing on Metropolis citizens being distrustful of Superman and if they could truly feel safe with a powerful alien whom they know nothing about, with the story showing Superman's first public appearance where he addressed people's questions about him and their concerns, like if he was a potential threat, or posing as a hero only to gain humans' trust so he could invade the planet with his fellow super aliens. Evan Dorkin and Sarah Dyer also shared some interesting facts about the production of the two-part episode Little Girl Lost, saying that the original plans for its story would have shown in detail how Granny Goodness and Darkseid created parademons by kidnapping and torturing young teenagers from different alien worlds they had conquered, such as Thanagar, Mars, and more. This is an aspect from the comics that often gets overlooked when the parademons get adapted in other media, since they truly are created by using prisoners of war from throughout the universe that get captured and transported to Apokolips, where they get tortured and genetically modified until they are transformed into mindless stormtroopers for Darkseid's army. For the original vision of this two-part episode, they planned on showing a huge Nazi-like concentration camp where these captured aliens were held in chains before they were transformed into parademons. They had gotten the green light to create the story as they had originally envisioned it, but apparently the network ended up asking for this element of the story to be changed. Speaking of Supergirl, another fun fact is that the staff initially wanted to stay closer to her comic book origins, depicting her as Superman's biological cousin and actually coming from Krypton. But this had to be changed since the network wanted Superman to be the only surviving Kryptonian on the show. So she was reworked as being a survivor from Argo, a sister planet to Krypton, also making reference to Argo City from the comics. Since we were talking about other members from the Super family, take a look at the Superboy Connor Kent design. This concept art and model sheet for the character has been circulating the internet for a while now. However, in my opinion, this doesn't seem to be concept art from the production of STAS or an unmade episode from the show, since it has a trademark for DC superheroes registered in 1999. So I believe it most likely originates from the DC superheroes coloring books that were published around that time, which sometimes showed other DC characters that never appeared on any DCAU shows drawn with its art style. While he never ended up appearing on the series, Connor did make an appearance in the 14th issue of Adventures in the DC Universe, which was a tie-in comic with the DCAU. And even though they're pretty much non-canon, I still would have loved to see Connor Kent appearing in the DCAU. Honestly, I would have loved to see all of these rejected characters and ideas being fully realized. And while we never got to see underrated characters like the Spectre or Black Lightning on the show or the DCAU in general, this collection of shows still gave us one of the most expansive versions of the DC universe we've seen outside the comics. The fact is that Superman the Animated Series still stands as one of the greatest adaptations of Superman ever created. It served as a fantastic way to make people enjoy the character's stories again, and it was also a really great introduction to his mythos and the DCU. Batman the Animated Series was also amazing and a classic of course, but it mostly remained isolated to Gotham. With STAS though, they truly expanded on the foundation that was established by BTAS and paved the way for one of the greatest on-screen shared universes we've ever seen. So yeah, it does suck that we never got to see a DCAU Spectre, but I'm still really happy with what we got, and grateful for having grown up with such a respectful adaptation of an entire comic book universe. But hey, now I want to know, what did you think about all these rejected ideas? What unused character would you have liked to see on the show, or in the DCAU in general? Please, share your thoughts in the comments, and as always, thank you so much for watching.